Today I'm going to be reading a book out loud in order to improve my vocabulary, my pronunciation of words, and also to get more comfortable at speaking into a camera, into a microphone. So the book that I picked today is The Death of Ivan Ilyich by Leo Tolstoy. I've heard about this book before, but I never read it. So let's get it started with. It's a short book. I don't know how long this video will be, but I will make other videos like this just to improve. So, the death of Ivan Ilyich. 1. In the large law court, in the large law court building, during an adjournment of the Melinsky trial, the members of the bench, oh my God, the members of the bench and the public prosecutor had come together in the office of Ivan Yegorovich Shebek, and the conversation touched on the celebrated Krasovsky case. Fyodor Vasilievich argued vehemently. I don't know what that means. Vehemently. With a lot of energy or a lot of passion or a lot of emotional strength. Okay. So where was I? Argued vehemently that it was beyond their jurisdiction. Let me just get comfortable. Sorry for the noise of the chair. Ivan Yegorovich Shebek, and the conversation touched on the celebrated Krasovsky case. Fyodor Vasilievich argued vehemently that it was beyond their jurisdiction. Ivan Yegorovich had his own view and was sticking to it, while Pyotr Ivanovich, who had kept out of the discussion at the outset and was still not contributing, was perusing a copy of the Gazette, which had just been delivered. "Gentlemen," he said, "Ivan Ilyich is dead." "Is he really?" "Here you are. Read it yourself," he said to Fyodor Vasilievich, handing him out the paper, fresh off the press and still smelling. There was an announcement within a black border. "It is with profound sorrow that Praskovia Fydorovna Golovina informs family and friends that her beloved husband, Ivan Ilyich Golovin, member of the Court of Justice, passed away at the 4th of February this year, 1882. The funeral will take place on Friday at 1 p.m. Ivan Ilyich had been a colleague of the gentlemen assembled there, and they had all liked him. I need some water. And they had all liked him. A colleague of gentlemen assembled there, and they had all liked him. He had been ill for several weeks, and the word was that his illness was incurable. His post had been kept open for him, but there was an understanding that in the event of his death, Alexiev would step into his place, and Alexiev's place would be taken by either Vinnikov or Stabel. So the first thought that occurred to each of the assembled gentlemen on hearing the news of his death was how his death might affect his own prospects and those of their acquaintances for transfer or promotion. "I'm sure to get Stabel's job now, or Vinnikov's," thought Fyodor Vasilievich. "They promised me ages ago, and a promotion like that would give me another 800 rubles a year, plus expenses. I must apply to have my brother-in-law transferred from Kaluga, thought Pyotr Ivanovich. "My wife will be delighted. She won't be able to tell me I never do anything for her people." "I had a feeling he wasn't going to get better," said Pyotr Ivanovich. "It's sad." What was actually wrong with him? The doctors couldn't decide. Well, they could, but they all decided differently. The last time I saw him, I thought he was going to come through it, and I haven't been to see him since Christmas. I kept meaning to go. Was he all right financially? His wife had a bit of money. I think nothing very much. Well, we'll have to go and see her. They live an awfully long way away. For you, they do. Where you live, everywhere's a long way away. Look at that. You can't forgive me for living across the river, said Peter Ivanovitch, smiling at Shebek. The conversation turned to the long distances between the different parts of the city, and then they walked back into session. Apart from speculations aroused in each of them by this death, concerning the transfers and possible changes that his death might bring about, the very fact of the death of someone close to them aroused in all who heard about it, as always, a feeling of delight that he had died and they hadn't. There you have it. He's dead, and I'm not, was what everyone thought or felt. But his closest acquaintances, Ivan Ilyich, so-called friends, couldn't help thinking that they would now have to fulfill some tedious social obligations, such as attending the funeral and calling on the widow to express their condolences. Closest of all were Fyodor Vasilievich and Peter Ivanovitch. Peter Ivanovitch was an old friend from law school, and he felt indebted to Ivan Ilyich. Over dinner, he told his wife about the death of Ivan Ilyich and the mooted possibility of her brother being transferred to their district. What does mooted mean? Not mudded, like mooted. Let me just. Mm, okay. Mooted. Mooted. Why is this? Okay. Mooted. Mood. It means to propose something. Okay. Over dinner, he told his wife about the death of Ivan Ilyich and the mooted possibility of her brother being transferred to their district, and then, dispensing with his usual nap, he put on a dress coat and set off for Ivan Ilyitch's house. At the entrance stood a carriage and two cabs. Downstairs, in the entrance hall, next to the coat stand, a coffin lid with silk brocade, tassels, and gold braid that had been powdered and polished stood propped against the wall. Two ladies in black were taking off their fur cloaks. He knew one of them, Ivan Ilyitch's sister, but not the other. His colleague, Schwartz, was at the top of the stairs about to come down, but when he saw Peter Ivanovitch, he stopped and gave him a wink that seemed to say, Ivan Ilyitch has messed things up. Not what you or I would have done. Schwartz's face, with his English side whiskers and his lean figure in formal dress, exuded, as always, an air of elegant solemnity. Give me a second. Solemnity.
Solemnity.
Solemnity. Exuded, as always, an air of elegant solemnity, and although the solemnity belied his playful personality, it was particularly poignant here, or so it seemed to Peter Ivanovich. Peter Ivanovich allowed the ladies to pass on ahead and slowly followed them upstairs. Instead of coming down, George stood waiting at the top. Peter Ivanovich knew why. He clearly wanted to arrange a game whist somewhere that evening. The ladies proceeded upstairs to see the window, but Schwartz pursed his lips tightly with all seriousness, though his eyes had a mischievous look that twitched his eyebrows, directing Peter Ivanovich off to the right and into the room where the dead man lay. Peter Ivanovich entered the room and hesitated, as people always do in these occasions, not knowing precisely what to do. The only thing he was certain of was that in this situation you couldn't go wrong if you made the sign of the cross. Whether or not you should bow at the same time, he wasn't sure, so he went for a compromise, crossing himself as he walked in and giving a bit of a bow as he did so. At the same time, as far as hand and head movements permitted, he glanced around the room. Two young persons, nephews apparently, one of them a schoolboy, were crossing themselves as they left the room. A little old woman was standing there motionless, and a lady with curiously arched eyebrows was whispering to her. A church reader in a frock coat, a hearty character of considerable spirit, was reading something out in a loud voice, and a tone that brooked no contradiction. Gerazim, the peasant waiting at the table, darted ahead of Peter Ivanovich, sprinkling something on the floor. Seeing this, Peter Ivanovich instantly recognized the slight smell of decaying flesh. When he had visited Ivan Ilyich for the first time, he had seen this peasant in what do they call him peasant? That's crazy. He had seen this peasant in Ivan Ilyich's room, acting as a sick nurse, and Ivan Ilyich had a special fondness for him. Peter Ivanovich kept on crossing himself and aimed a slight bow midway between the reader, the coffin, and the icons on the corner of the table. Then, when the business of crossing himself seemed to be going on for too long, he paused and took a close look at the dead man. The dead man had lay as all dead men lie, unusually heavy, with his head weight, with rigid limbs sinking into the soft lining of the coffin, and his head bowed for eternity on the pillow. And he displayed what dead people always display: a waxen yellow forehead, with bald patches all over his hollow temples, and protruding nose that seemed to be pressing down hard on his upper lip. He had changed a good deal. He was even thinner than he had been when Peter Ivanovich had last seen him. But, as with all dead bodies, his face had acquired greater beauty, or more to the point, greater significance. Okay, let me go back on this one. Acquired greater beauty, or more to the point, greater significance than it had in life. Then it had had in life. Than it had had in life. Its expression seemed to say that what needed to be done had been done, and done properly. More than that, the expression contained a reproach of at least a reminder to the living. The reminder seemed out of place to Peter Ivanovich, or at least he felt it didn't apply to him personally. But an unpleasant feeling came over him, and he crossed himself again. Too hurriedly, he thought the haste was almost indecent. Before turning and heading for the door, Schwartz was waiting for him in the next room, with his feet planted apart, and both hands fiddling with the top hat held behind his back. One glance at his mischievous, immaculately elegant figure and Peter Ivanovich felt restored. He could see that Schwartz was above all this and imprevious would be impervious to anything that might have been depressing. His very appearance spoke volumes. In no way would the occasion of Ivan Ilitch's funeral serve as a reason for cancelling their usual session. In other words, nothing would prevent them from breaking open a new pack of rifling through cars that evening while a servant set up four new candles. There was, in fact, no reason to think that this occasion should stop them from having a good time that very evening. He said so in a low voice to Peter Ivanovich as he walked past, proposing that they meet for a game at Fyodor Vasilievich. But Peter Ivanovich was clearly not destined to play whist that evening. Praskovia Fydorovna, a short, plump woman whose body expanded from the shoulders down, despite her best efforts to the contrary, done out in black, with a lace shawl over her head, the same the same curiously arched eyebrows as the lady facing the coffin, emerged from her chambers with some other ladies, showed them to the door of the dead man's room, and said, "The service is about to begin. Do go in." Schwartz made an indeterminate bow and stood there without accepting or rejecting this invitation. Praskovia, recognizing Peter Ivanovich, gave him a sigh and went straight up to him, took him by the hand, and said, "I know you are a good friend of Ivan Ilyich." And she looked at him, anticipating a suitable response. Peter Ivanovich knew that just as he had to cross himself in there, out here it was necessary to squeeze her hand and say with a sigh, "Believe me." And that's what he did. Having done it, he felt that the desired effect had been achieved. He had been touched, and she had been touched. "Let's go in before they get started. I must have a word with you," said the widow. "Give me your arm." Peter Ivanovich offered an arm, and they made their way into the inner rooms, walking past Schwartz, who gave Peter Ivanovich a gloomy wink. "No use for you, then. You won't mind if we find another partner. You won't mind if we find another partner. We might make up a five-some when you can get free," said his mischievous glance. Peter Ivanovich sighed even more deeply and plaintively, and Praskovia showed her gratitude by squeezing his hand. Proceeding into a drawing room, which was done out in pink cretonne, cretonne. Oh, okay. Which was done out in pink cretonne. Pink cretonne, and lit by one dismal lamp. They sat down near a table, she on the sofa, he on the low poof, with broken springs that wobbed unevenly as he sat on it. Praskovia had wanted to warn him off into another chair, but a warning like that did not seem appropriate in the circumstances, so she thought better of it. As he sat down on his poof, Peter Ivanovich remembered the time when Ivan Ilyich had been decorating this room and had asked for advice about this pink cretonne with the green leaves. On her way past the table to sit down on the sofa, the room was crammed with furniture and knickknacks. Praskovia snagged the black lace off her black shawl on the carved edge of the table. Peter Ivanovich rose slightly to disentangle it, thus releasing the poof, which quivered and pushed up at